I'm gonna sing, I'm gonna shout, I'm gonna let the reason out that his love goes on forever. I'm gonna take it all the way, I'm gonna praise you.
Hi, I'm Pastor Bill with the Maple Minute for this Thursday, March the 18th, 2021. Before we get into today's Maple Minute, I just want to remind you, if you haven't subscribed to our channel on YouTube, please go ahead and do that now so that you can quickly get all the updates. And if you'd like to make a comment, please try and do that too. Also, if you're following us on Facebook, we'd love to connect with you and hear from you. And if you would like us and then share this video out, it would help a lot of other people down the road as we try and connect with them in our mission to help people in their journey through life with Jesus Christ. You know, we've been in the book of Ecclesiastes now for quite some time, and we're nearing the end of it. And as we get through this, we are looking into the life of Solomon. Solomon is an older man, and he is looking back on his life. And in this life, his life has really been about wisdom. If you know anything about Solomon, Solomon is claimed to have been the wisest man to have ever lived, because when he was young, he asked God, as God said he would give him one thing in life, he asked God for wisdom. You know, Solomon has spent a lifetime now dealing in wisdom. First, it was accepting it, and then it was learning to nurture it, and he exercised it as a king, and he thought upon it even as an older adult. And eventually, what we find is he's betrayed it now that he's in his old age, and that's really the point of what's going on here in the first 11 chapters of Ecclesiastes. You see, if in the case of Solomon, if wisdom is your highest reference point, then you see foolishness as the very bane of your existence. It's almost something that you despise. Solomon saw foolishness everywhere as he looks through life, and he points out all the hypocrisies of life, all the downfalls, and even as we talked about last time, the foolishness of how life cheats us, and it annoys him. You know, we have a huge sense of fairness, don't we? Well, he knew that there was a huge dividing line between what we would call wisdom and foolishness or folly, sometimes as he says, and he warns us to stay away from that line of foolishness. It's something that we're drawn to all the time. In fact, you know the verse that most often parents think about in the Bible is that foolishness is bound in the heart of a child. It was something I learned about my kids and even other people's kids as I worked with youth. You know, Ecclesiastes chapter 10, as we enter into it, is like a lost chapter of Proverbs, where Solomon dispenses these little short nuggets of wisdom to keep us on the wise side of life. In fact, as we begin this journey in chapter 10, and we're going to just deal with the first part of it today, Solomon warns us about foolishness in 4 prominent areas of life. And the first one we're going to talk about is foolishness in the little things. And that's what we're going to look at today. He talks about other things down the road, but he starts off here, and he really gives us the first thought is about a fly in the ointment. In Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 1, he says, "Dead flies," that's sort of gross, "make the perfumer's ointment give off a stench. So a little folly or foolishness outweighs wisdom and honor." This is Solomon's vivid way of illustrating how a tiny bit of foolishness, just a small little fly, a tiny little insect, can destroy the powerful fragrance of a person's dignity and reputation. That's what he's talking about. You know, there are a lot of other places in the Bible that small things are warned against. Paul warned in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 6, he tells the Corinthians, he says, "Your boasting is not good. Do you not know that a little leaven leavens the whole lump?" He's given us that illustration about leaven, or what we would use something to cause a reaction in bread to make it rise, the yeast, right? That's pretty much the whole term. And he says, you just need a little bit because it goes and permeates the whole thing. And that's one of those things. It's a little thing that really changes everything in our life. In the Song of Solomon, Solomon writes this: "Catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that spoil the vineyards for our vineyards are in blossom." And that's sort of a warning to all the married people or potentially married people to make sure you watch out for the little things in your marriage relationship. You watch out for the little things in your romance, because it's the little foxes that spoil the vineyard. It's the little things that will spoil your marriage. It's not the big things. It's the little things that lead to the big things. And even this, James, in his great New Testament writing, he says that so also in James chapter 3, verse 5, so also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. And he goes on to talk about how that the tongue is something that is so destructive, but it's just a small little part of our body. And so it is the small things that ruin us. And this is Solomon's, once again, trying to warn us about the foolishness of life. And we need to be careful about the little things. There's foolishness or folly in little things. He goes on not to just talk about the fly in the ointment, but he talks about obedience in the little things in the second verse in Ecclesiastes chapter 10. He says, a wise man's heart inclines him to the right, but a fool's heart to the left. You know, in biblical times, and even in today's day and age, but in biblical times, a person's right hand was perceived to be the place of power. So obedience in the little things implies that we're standing in the place of wisdom and power. That means when we keep slipping up in the little things, it indicates that we're standing in the place of foolishness. Our power and influence are diluted, and that's why he says the foolish heart goes to the left. It's weak. It's weak-minded. It's weak in life, weak in living. We need to make sure that we're standing in the place of power by inclining ourselves to wisdom, because wisdom, once again, is something from God. He finishes out in verse number 3 by telling us that small decisions affect big outcomes, and that really is a huge lesson we need to understand. And I think we've all heard it before, but sometimes we don't really grab hold of this truth. Small decisions do affect big outcomes. In chapter 10, verse 3, he says, even when the fool walks on the road, he lacks sense, and he says to everyone that he is a fool. What a small decision, but it's foolishness. And that's what he's talking about. It reminds me of an old saying you've probably heard before. It goes like this: for want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of the shoe, the horse was lost. For want of the horse, the rider was lost. For want of the rider, the battle was lost. For want of the battle, the kingdom was lost. And all for the want of a horseshoe nail. You know, he's talking about the little things that lose the battles of our lives. You know, you're going to go through this week and maybe today, and it's just going to be little decisions that are going to affect your line of decision. Whether you walk on the path of wisdom or you walk on the other side of foolishness. I know people that'll get up today and they'll probably choose to be foolish in pursuing the wrong things. They won't take the time to sit down and have a personal time with God and meet with Him and ask Him for help through their day. You know, the bottom line is, and this is what we need to understand in these little things that Solomon's warning us about, is that every detail of life sets in motion a chain of events that we cannot predict. That's really the warning. And so when we walk on the foolish side, when we think that what we are doing is more important than anything God is doing, when we neglect our life with Him, then we're walking on the foolish side, and we're not walking in power, and we're losing that fragrance of dignity and reputation that could be so great because we're letting little things come in and ruin us. You see, according to Solomon, the one who pays the terrible price for the tiny choices in their life is the fool. So as you go through today, as you go through this week, seek wisdom and don't walk on the wild side of life. Let's walk on the wise side of life. And let's not be listed as a fool. Because bottom line, the fool is the person who says no to God. That's the Bible definition of a fool. So let's open up our lives and say, yes, God, and let's walk in the little things on the wise side of life.
Lift His name up high, 'cause His love goes on forever. His love reaches to the high.